I'll take care of it right away. Hey, Jimmy, check this headline. Boys! Take that over there.
My hat's off to Grant and George for taking just being inspired and then being brave enough to do this, and just by force of will. I often say that Grant and George are the Fred Friendly and the Edward Murrow of this thing.
I loved watching the Friendly boys and Ruth, and watching Casey Murrow standing there and backing us and going, tell that story, make sure you get it out, and that we can go to them and say, you tell me where we get it wrong, which is what we do all the time. So what they are is they're our sources. They're our two reliable sources.
There's a fine balance of taking license, writing scenes where we knew scenes took place. We knew there was conversations that took place, but nobody was in those rooms, so we had to invent those. You try to speculate and try to stay in with what you think the spirit of the actual scene was, because we're certainly not trying to revise history in any way.
I think the movie does a fascinating job of telling a story of an era in a way that I hope a lot of people will encounter. And I think of this as being a really powerful thing for younger people too, for school, college, and so forth to be aware of.
I'll take care of it right away. Hey, Jimmy, check this headline.
I love being around people who stuck their neck out. I love it. These people were scared and did it anyway. And I love being around that. It's heroic. And they got nothing for it, Joe Wershford didn't end up rich. Milo Radulovich didn't end up in some great mansion somewhere. They did it because they thought it was the right thing to do.
Most of the people that Ed worked with, he would refer to as my colleagues. Not the Murrow boys, my colleagues and I. And only one guy was my partner, Fred Friendly, and I. And that was a distinction.
Fred was very, he had a caring, an aggressiveness, an enthusiasm.
He did every story as if his life depended on it, so he went from one life to the next life regularly, full blast.
He had 100 ideas a day, of which someone said 4 of which are good, and he used to say to his assistants, your job is to figure out which 4.
Each film that he worked on hard became a crusade.
Mm-hmm. And no matter what he demanded of you, you did it because you believed in what he was doing. He believed in it and you believed in it.
Yeah, the phone would ring at 3 o'clock in Europe or Asia or Africa. Ed wants. It's Fred Friendly on the line. Ed wants. Everybody knew it wasn't Ed wanting, it was Fred wants. But you went to work getting what Ed wanted.
And we all laid down our lives for Ed.
Hey, Jimmy, check this headline.
What we wanted to do was, to show the drama of the situation, what it would be like to be in that sort of that boiling period of history where people were very fearful.
It was a very different era, and I, in elementary school in New York, I wore dog tags every day to school because of the assumption there would be a nuclear attack and so forth. Every kid in New York City wore dog tags.
It was a fearful time that people were afraid. What would happen to them? What could you say or couldn't you say? So that's hard to translate in today's world.
This was real. People were terrified of their neighbors. They were terrified of the nuclear bomb. They were terrified of losing their jobs. And to have somebody step up and go, everybody walk out of the shadows that's not afraid right now, and suddenly realize it was 70% of the country. And they had no idea.
Up until then, there hadn't really been a controversial program.
Back then, there weren't a ton of news shows, and there were really no shows like this.
And they had started first with Hear It Now, and then moved into See It Now, which Ed was very dubious about.
He resisted going from Hear It Now to See It Now, because he felt that the word was all, that it went directly to a different kind of mental processing of information than the good-looking, attractive seduction of color and image.
I think he felt that the camera invaded to such an extent that, particularly in those days with huge equipment and lights and so forth, that it changed the story, and that on radio you didn't have to change the story when you arrived.
Boy. Boy! Take that over there. Boy!
It was at this period of time that Murrow, who is a journalist. I mean, he's a real journalist who decides that there are not two sides to every story, and if they're going to take a side on a story, they're going to editorialize, and that was a huge thing. Yeah.
I think they were, as Murrow said, not descended from fearful men, and they were very aware of their heritage. Yes, their lives and their futures were at stake, but more important to them than that even was that they knew what was at stake for the country, and that if they missed, the country could be subjected to 10 or 15 more years of escalating McCarthyism.
What's interesting is sort of the way they go about it, that they don't really go at him head on. They decide that they're going to sort of look for the little picture first.
And they found it in Milo Radulovich.
So I see the staff car pull up in the street ahead of the house, and two guys got out, one a major and one a sergeant, staff sergeant. Says, well, we've got a letter that we're supposed to deliver to you, hand carried, right to you. And I said, what's it about? He says, we're going to discharge you from the Air Force. That's what it's about, because of a security risk problem with you. Bye, see you later. Out he went. That's it. That was the visit.
When Joe went out there, what Fred wanted to know, is he verbal? Can he talk? Is he super? Will he talk? They were collecting film on McCarthy wherever he went. And the question was, when do we have enough? When is it all right to go?
Because once they go after McCarthy, it's do or die.
Boy. Boy! Take that over there. Boy!
I would say that Ed agonized from the start whether he had really the right to use his tremendous engine of power to go against one man. And I think he resolved that by saying that this man who is running roughshod over American liberties has all the protection that he needs from the very constitutional rights that he was trampling on.
People were sore, why haven't you done something already, So they were getting it from both sides.
The issue was crystallized in that, right or wrong, he's entitled to meet his accuser and to find out what the charges were.
It's an interesting clash between politics and journalism. I'm not a journalist, but from this point of view, I'm playing a journalist, and from that point of view, our job is to question authority. It's your duty. It's your patriotic duty to question authority. Television news had two truly great moments. The last of them was Walter Cronkite stepping out from behind his desk, which he had never done before, to point at Vietnam, having just come back from Vietnam, and say, this does not work. This is a civil war that's been going on for 1,000 years, and we cannot win it. The other, and the first of them, was Murrow taking on McCarthy. There were a lot of people that were against McCarthy, but you needed it said out loud. And Murrow said it out loud when nobody, there were writers that were doing it, but no broadcast journalists that were doing it. And it had immediate impact.
I think when that program was over, actually when Talbert, the Air Force Secretary of Defense, said he is reinstated, that Radulovich was reinstated, or we wanted him to stay, that really made them realize the power of this instrument.
They knew it would have a huge impact, at least immediately, on that group of people who were working on it. As to what it would do to television in the long run, or to broadcast journalism in the long run, I wonder how much time they had to think about that but Dad spent a lot of time thinking about that sort of thing. So I'm sure he, to some extent, did.
You know, he was really prophetic about the nature or what the evolution of television would be. So he said if television is not allowed to do investigation as well as entertainment, and he said that television would distract, delude, and entertain and insulate us from realities of the world we live in.
The overall climate today in the environment in television news is pretty frightening, and I think Dad would be horrified by that.
The initial responsibility given by the FCC to the 3 networks, or the 2 networks initially, and then it was the 3 networks, was we're going to give you airwaves that belong to the people. We're going to lease them to you.
The idea was that, you know, the public owns the airwaves, you know, and that for that, the corporations that put out television, you know, have basically a social contract.
And your job is, every 6 hours, you owe us a half an hour of news, just to give back to society. That's the rules. And for 30 years or so, that worked pretty well.
There always was this sort of trying to balance, you know, news, making money, and the news, which never did make money until they realized that somebody realized you could make money on the news.
And in doing that, they decided that they had to flash it up and make it more about entertainment. All of a sudden, news content went out. And suddenly we're watching things that have absolutely no news value on network news, not just local news.
The trust in television news, I think, has diminished considerably. And that's very sad, because some of the people that we know who are still in the industry want to tell it straight and want to tell it real and want to tell what's important rather than watering it down with little entertainment tidbits.
Dad was unhappy with the state of television when he passed away 5-6 years ago, and had become very disenchanted after he left CBS News in '65 or '66, after the Senate Vietnam hearings, and CBS refused to carry them in favor of a 4th rerun of an I Love Lucy episode. And that's, at that time, and it was clear to him and to Ed that this medium was, I'll paraphrase, but was making too much money to do its best. It was making too much money doing its worst to do its best.
It's all about speed and competition. I got to get the story out there and beat these guys. And if you watch Murrow speaking about it in 1958, it was the same problem then, which is corporate still has the money, and the money still has sort of connections here. It's part of capitalism. It is part of what we're designed to do. The point is that we have to be better than that.
Nobody is careful in the way that See It Now was. They didn't just come out and say McCarthy's a terrible man. They put his words on the air, what he was saying and what was the truth, and everything was researched to a fare thee well, so that they could not be caught being careless with the facts. Today, everybody's careless with the facts.
I'll take care of it right away. Hey, Jimmy, check this out, man.
What is your hope for this project?
An open discussion about responsibility and open discussion. I find it sort of fun to have, people kept trying to politicize this as we do it. You know, we'll have journalists come to the set and they'll go, oh, this is all about today. You go, it's about Guantanamo Bay and the right to face your accuser. And the truth is, there is absolutely, that is a fact. There are parallels that are sort of amazing. But it's also about the responsibility of journalism.
Your film will be a reminder to a generation who doesn't remember or care much about the role of broadcast journalism, of the potential and the power of this medium. I think Dad would be thrilled to see what's going on here. I know he would be.
I just wanted to remind people that watching it happen and being done very well is not antiquated. It's not old. It doesn't seem wrong to me.
Hey,